Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined by Covey, and once again with a special guest, Christian, who will go ahead and get into introductions. But before we start our dialogue, first and foremost, want to continue to thank everybody who continues to show love and appreciation for us.
What's going on, guys? Matt here, as always. We've got another guest. Super excited for this one. His name's Christian Gonzales. Kind of an interesting story that I want to tell really quickly about how I found Christian. Obviously, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and as part of that, I was wearing a pair of shorts I actually got from Stance at the gym, and one of the guys I know at the gym was like, "Dude, those are sweet shorts. Like, where'd you get them?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'll send you the link later." So I go on Stance's website to send him the link, and I see on the front page of Stance.com is this collaboration that Christian's got with Stance going on right now for Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm like, I got to reach out. Like, that's super cool. And sure enough, here we are. So Christian can kind of get into that later, but is doing a collaboration with Stance on some of his work, which has some ties to mental health. So without further ado, this is Christian Gonzales. I'll let Christian, if you just want to provide a little bit of a background on kind of who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. What's up, everyone? Born and raised in Bogota, Colombia. Moved to the States, 2000, moved to Miami, Florida. Grew up over there, started getting into design. Actually, I ended up working first it was in the production aspect of things like key gripping and gaffing and, assisting as a cam op for friends that are cinematographers. But built that through first, and then I realized, man, I kind of don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So I started just kind of teaching myself how to do design. So I would just work a 9 to 5, and then from 6 to like 2 a.m. I would just explore things and do a lot of mixed media stuff, like a lot of loose drawings. I draw like a fifth grader, and then I realized people were connecting to that, so I was just like, shit, might as well just keep running it. And then at the age of 25, I was in a relationship that really pushed my mental boundaries, and I kind of like had like a severe mental breakdown, and that was my first introduction to therapy. And it was my therapist. Shout out Vicky Watering out there. I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but I'll probably send her the link. Yeah, she gave me two options, either to take medication or kind of like take the rougher route and trying to develop some coping mechanisms. And it just so happened that I was just picking up making like mental health advocate posters because I would find myself doom scrolling every single time I would get depressed and comparing myself to other people, like people that I looked up to. So she just challenged me to, like, every single time I had an episode or felt like something was coming up, just create something and express myself through that. So I started posting him, and it served more of as an anchor. So if I was scrolling down on things, I would just like find it, and it was just very raw messagings behind them. And then that kind of caught some traction social media wise, and then I started getting hit up to help people do designs for their merch and creative direct for artists. And man, it's led to me honestly moving out here to California because majority of the clients, one of them being Childish Gambino, ended up reaching out his team through a really good friend of mine to work on a Coachella piece back in 2018 or 2019, and that landed me moving out here and then connecting me to a way bigger world creatively. And yeah, it's been kind of like a wild ride.
So when you were at your lowest point, like, did you ever in a million years think you'd be where you are today? Like designing merchandise around mental health. That's question one. And my follow up is just like, what prompted you to get therapy? I mean, you can see I'm a huge proponent. I'm wearing a hat that
Yeah.
says "Go to therapy." Normally, I wouldn't wear a hat, but I'm rocking the "Love Your Mind," which we can
I,
talk about that Christian designed. But what prompted you to go to therapy? Was it a recommendation by a friend, or was it just all self-directed by you?
it was through a really good friend of mine that lives out in New York. I had found out that he was help assisting with the suicide hotlines and stuff like that. And I always knew growing up I was very, very emotional kid. So when I was experiencing this severe like mental breakdown, to get real, it was one of those things that I would envision my death sporadically. Like I would be driving to Target, and then for some reason while I'm driving, I would get overwhelmed and like imagine getting T-boned or something. And I just had this severe fear that the more I got accustomed to those kind of like sporadic thoughts, the more I would feel like inclined to just what if I did pull the trigger on some level. And I remember reaching out to my really good friend Darren about that, and he's the one who kind of like broke it down to me and the benefits of going to therapy, and um, how it could actually help me kind of like garner those thoughts and really see what was going on. And yeah, that was the introduction for it. I hadn't really thought about it when I had before that, but I just always knew that like in my mind I was an emotional storm.
Did you ever get to maybe like the root of what made you an emotional kid growing up? Um, just labeling yourself, I was an emotional kid, right? Like, what
Yeah.
is there any reason to that you were able to look back on in your childhood
Yeah.
for that?
Yeah, the more I went through the sessions, I realized that a lot of it had to deal with, the divorce of my parents prior to me being born. My mom and dad, and mind you, I'm like still super close, and I love them. They ended up splitting, I believe, like 2 to 3 months before I was born. So the way that I feel like it could be a thing is just that probably my mom went through some sort of severe emotional trenches before I was born. So that's the only way I feel like it could be that I ended up just naturally being like a kid that just feels heavy. And I'm a crier, dude. I cried to Wally, so it's kind of like
So we've we've it's all right. I'm sure I've got a movie that I don't know. I'd have to think, but we've talked about generational differences and like the different perceptions of therapy in
hmm.
particular, but maybe even just being an emotional kid and a man or a son being emotional, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had familial support when you had to go to therapy, or did you feel like this was more like just between you and your friend?
It was just more between me and my friend. I didn't really get a chance to open up to my parents until probably third or fourth therapy session, just because also too, growing up in a Hispanic household, there is like this generational like outlook, and maybe too the way that I saw it, I kind of like had the blinders on that I had to be this type of male figure, someone that couldn't really show weakness or anything, and maybe I don't believe maybe my parents would have reacted like in a negative way if I would have opened up to them earlier, but it's just like based off of upbringings and things that you hear around at school growing up too. Like there's some things that like you really just don't really get to break down until you're like mentally ready for. And I think it was like towards the fourth session that my therapist was suggested that I should speak to my parents about it. And I remember that
Did you
dinner.
have a yeah, I'm sure. Did you have any sort of stigma like when you went into therapy? Because for me, it was like I got recommended to therapy, and it's kind of like, oh God, therapy, like I must be fucked up, or this is, I just had a very negative stigma associated with it. But I was at the point,
Hmm.
probably similar to you, where it was like kind of down in the dumps. It's like, what's the worst that could happen kind of thing, so like let's give it a try. But like, did you have any outlook kind of before going into therapy around therapy itself?
Not really. I didn't have a negative stigma. It just happened so quickly when I ended up jumping into it, just because of like mentally where I was at. But it was kind of similar in the same way. Like, man, am I really this fucked in the head? Will I ever get out of this? Will I be medicated or not? Or am I gonna have to put myself in a facility? Like, I had heard so many things, but I didn't know where to put myself within those things.
I mean, that's an interesting ultimatum almost by like your therapist, like, hey, you have two options here: either you take medication or you take the hard road. Like,
Yeah.
what was your thought process there? Because I feel like a lot of people probably, people generally want to take the easy path. Like, what prompted you to go, like, no, I want to actually, like, I want to go down there in that, in the darkness and work through this?
Uh, for me, I've always never been someone that feels comfortable when I'm codependent on a specific substance or something. Even like growing up, I've never really had like a much of an addictive personality. So it's always been like, just go through it. Just, sure, like, in high school I smoked weed. Cool, I smoked weed, and I would just go months without like smoking weed or whatever. I could like go on and off about that or like drinking or whatever. But yeah, for some reason for me it just seemed more of like the longevity of it. It's kind of like it's not a race, it's a marathon. Rome wasn't built in like two. What is it in 3 days or whatever. But I kind of just figured if I go through the trenches, then I'll get to really understand what's going on in my mind. Why am I thinking the way that I'm thinking? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? And I figured, cool, if I do that, knowing how expensive therapy is in the States, then maybe I can save a couple bucks later down the road.
I mean, it's just so interesting to me that like the rough road is the non-medicated road because you like medications are so serious and
Mm-hmm.
significant to your brain chemistry, right?
Yeah.
Um, I've heard from Covey what's been like the rough or hard part of breaking yourself down and going through therapy. Like, what from your perspective, like, was it indeed the hard way? Did you feel like it was actually a very difficult journey to go the route that you took?
Yeah, I would say like probably like the first 2 years, 3 years, because you're discovering things about yourself that I didn't really realize until like I self-checked myself. Bad habits of the way that I was thinking, bad habits that I was, you know, percepting like friends and homies and family members. These things that like it felt so unfair that I would put such pressure on like people to have expectations met. The fact that I would put people in a box that that didn't deserve to be in a box, and I realized a lot of that stuff that like jumping into conclusions about things that weren't even like a thing, and it
Add,
was it
add
was
some more
hard.
color to that. Like, what's an example of putting somebody in a box? Like, I know what you're trying to say figuratively, but like, really
Yeah.
paint it literally. Just an example. No names needed, but
No,
just an
of course,
example.
yeah. Like for example, it was there were some friendships growing up where I felt like, oh, they just don't give a shit about me. It's one of those things like they were laughing at me, not with me. That was like a very like toxic phrase that I would tell myself a lot. And it wasn't that, it was the fact that they were going through their life journey, struggles as well. And it was one of those things that they just couldn't have that energy where they could feed, not much feeding, but they didn't have the energy left to like be able to be there for me in the way that I would expect them to, right? But I can't put that blame on them, and I can't put them in a box of like, oh man, that's like a damn, that what a horrible homie, that how could they do that to me when they're going through probably the same, or to them what could be worse, and I'm
That
expecting that.
No, that goes to the whole point of, which is so freeing when you're able to, is like freeing yourself from not taking things personal,
Mm,
because to your point, like they're suffering, in their own way, and like just like you probably when you maybe if you lashed out on someone that maybe necessarily wasn't an action actually meant to be for them, like it was more something deep rooted that you were struggling with that then gets taken out on someone else.
yeah.
And like for me, and it sounds like that's exactly what was happening. And then when you're able to actually realize that like whomever that was is probably treating a lot of others in a similar respect. Like it's not really towards you and
Yeah.
about you. It's more like a deep, So that was really really helpful for me. Did you? Because I had quote unquote breakthrough, if you will, in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Like where I felt like a very high level of mental clarity.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I was very fogged up for a while. My brain, I couldn't see, wasn't seeing clearly, and then all of a sudden, I don't want to say overnight, but like over a few weeks, I really started to see the world for what it was and see myself for who I was. did you have something similar? Like, I know for me, therapy is not a people think you go to therapy and it just goes like this, and like
Yeah.
for me it was like this, and I probably went down a little bit. You're breaking yourself down, and then it's like a slow and steady climb. Like, what was it for you?
Yeah. For me, it was kind of that. It was like came in hot, went down deep, like very deep, then went back up, and then back down again. But to me, what ended up being the breakthrough for me was realizing that my mind tends to go very quickly about things. So it's finding the form of meditation and rationalizing that really helped. Once that tool was introduced to me, was kind of like a game changer, and that's when I started developing the habit of kind of like low key talking to myself, like, all right, why am I feeling like this? What's causing that? Is this your ego? Is this your pride? Or is this like an overall outlook like, yo, this is actually like a situation? But it was that meditation to me was like, I think the breakthrough because it helped me really like slow things down and analyze what was going on. But again, it took like trial and error. Of these, what coping mechanisms worked, which ones were paper over cracks, and kind of just gotta test things out, see what works.
Yeah.
So do you meditate regularly, and are there any other coping mechanisms, and maybe not just coping, but like anything that you've taken from therapy that you apply as a practice or as an exercise outside of therapy, like meditation as an example?
Like self-care, basically.
Yeah, just anything self-care wise.
Yeah.
Anything that people can be doing, whether they're feeling like they need to get out of rock bottom or not, or they just want to do self-care. Like what other things do?
Yeah, so I tend to do meditation at least twice a week, 5 minutes. My head is in such a creative state that sometimes when I do more than five, I end up just thinking about like creative stuff. So I rather just like dial it down to 5 minutes, and then I do this thing called morning pages, where you just have a journal, and then within the first 30 minutes of being awake, you just grab this journal, and it's just like a streamless. It's like word vomiting into a journal, essentially. But the reason why I enjoy doing it is because when you tend to write things down, whatever comes into your mind, like your subconscious tends to just go down. And it just helps me start the day with like a clear mind, no fogginess. I'm just like more focused in myself, and then really like figure out how to tackle the day from there. But yeah, meditation and morning pages, and then I try to skate here and there.
I love the journaling part, right? Like, because it's something I've started doing in the beginning of the year, and
Yeah.
it's not like life changing, but it provides a lot more benefits than I think people think when you hear. Like, I do more gratitude journaling. And I do it at
Yeah.
night before, like, at night before bed, relative to I think what you pick whatever people work. For some people it's in the morning when you wake up. For some people it's at night before you go to bed, and you reflect more. But something as simple, and it's like a 10-minute exercise. And
Yeah.
it's just it really helped me appreciate the little things. Like, I've said it on this show before, but like day one, it's like, I don't know, I'm gonna write the same thing every day. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my friends. I'm grateful for my dog. And then month 3, it's like, I can write a full page like that. Like, I'm grateful to have a roof over my head, food to eat, and it's so
Yeah.
easy. And you pick out little things in the day, and it's so easy to do. And I think just the act of writing something down that's
Yeah.
in your mind, like, is very powerful. So it's interesting that you said that. And I know you've started journaling recently too. I finally got you on the train.
Yeah, I like to write, and I've also picked up meditation, and I'm looking for other self-care exercises. The idea of journaling really appealed to me. I actually have one that's a little bit more guided. It's a gratitude journal, but it's a morning piece that it's twice a day. It's a morning piece, 3 sections, and then there's a night reflective piece. There's 2 sections or 2 questions they ask you.
Yeah.
We can give one of the questions a go. We all just had a day, and I'm curious, like, if we want to just take a second and just share maybe a highlight of the day for each
Yeah.
person.
Christian, you start, man.
Shit, man. I'm grateful for family. My mom, today is Mother's Day. I'm grateful for my girlfriend, incredibly, super strong, independent, woman, and I'm just grateful to be alive, to be honest too. At the end of the day, I think like
Yeah.
that's the big milestone for me.
Yeah, shout out all the mothers out there. This will be
Yeah.
coming out on Mother's Day, but we are recording it on Mother's Day.
Yeah, we
No,
are.
I would say the highlight for me is just from today was improv. Like I do comedy improv class,
Oh,
which I'm not
nice.
sure if you're familiar with, but it's just 3 hours every Sunday where you're just I'm not my phone is away because I'm always on my phone and my phone is in my pocket or it's on the ground and I'm like laughing for 3 hours straight. I'm present for 3 hours straight. I'm listening to people for It's just a very like get into a flow state, if you will.
Mm.
And I'm super super lucky to be able to do that. That was definitely the highlight of my day.
Present, laughing, and listening for 3 hours straight. That's, I mean, I challenge anybody to think about the last time they spent. I mean, I got to challenge
Yeah.
myself. The last time I was 3 hours focused on those, like having those three things happening continuously.
It really will bring a
Yeah.
sense of like euphoria. Like I encourage anyone. I started like not to go down an improv hole. We'll keep this quick, but like I started improv for professional reasons. Someone recommended it as like, hey, this will help you with public speaking and confidence, and it has. But on top of that, it is just so enjoyable. Like
Yeah.
you're listening to people just and it challenges you every single week. Like I've been doing it for 3 months now, and I still feel challenged. It's still uncomfortable, but it's like it's a good level of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's and you're forcing yourself to put yourself out there and say whatever the hell comes to your mind, and that's fun. And people are
Yeah.
supportive, and it's a great tool. So I challenge anyone out there if you have any sort of interest in improv, because every time I tell someone or most people, it's like, oh, I'd be so bad at that. It's like you would be just fine. Like it's what people tell themselves. Like you'd be okay. You're with 15 other people that probably think the same thing when they start improv.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah,
Let's hear your highlight.
yeah, gosh, I have to pick one. I'll mention a couple. I gifted my own mom the same gratitude journal for Mother's Day. I was like, here,
Oh, love
you have a
that.
lot of thoughts. You have a lot to say normally. Take pen to paper. And then the other one I would say is introducing meditation to my parents mid car ride back here. I opened
I
up
can't imagine how that
I
conversation.
love
it's
that.
unbelievable. Well, my mom brings it up out of nowhere. And, oh, Michael, did you tell Dad that you started meditating? I'm like, no, I didn't tell him. But I opened up the Calm app. I was trying to get them to understand like sleep meditation. It's pretty cool when you turn on like a 30-minute Calm app. Shout out like Frankie Bridge, I think is her name. The 30 minutes, my dad almost fell asleep at the wheel. So
Oh, wow.
well, I mean, we didn't play it for 30 minutes, but
Yeah.
they got the gist of it, and it's pretty cool. It's a cool way to go to sleep with your head clear, which I can't imagine. I'd actually ask you like, think about when you go to sleep. Are you normally going to sleep with a clear head?
Oh man. Sometimes. I'll be lying if I said yeah. I would say sometimes. Um, me and my girlfriend tend to like do this thing like where we unwind the day by just watching Reno 911 or What Do We Do in the Shadows, because we both just work in creative fields, so we just like choose to just like laugh and have those moments in a way. Right before we go to bed, I feel like laughter is such a beautiful medicine, so we just tend to like watch fun things, and it's become kind of like that routine. So I wouldn't think about it much as a clear head, but when I do put my head on my pillow, I do knock out pretty fast. So I'm imagining that like that's been helping me.
I like that you said laughter is a beautiful medicine because it's so it's so unique for everyone. Like, everyone's got to figure out what it is for them. Like I would have never thought in a million. For me, it's one of them is improv. Like I like shows don't really do it for me. But what does is that and it's a challenge. People just need to try new things and figure out what's your thing. Like
Yeah.
what is your medicinal? What gives you like a sense of peace and laughter? But I have a question. So, like the quote that's on our hats here, if people are watching, "Love your mind."
Mm-hmm.
Just talk me through what that means to you. I mean, I've got like what to me as someone that didn't create it, what that meant to me and why that resonated with me. But like as the person that created it, what does that mean to you?
It's just making time for yourself. What I realized through my depressions and all the therapy journey that I've been through is that like majority of the times I saw depression as this thing that I had to cut out of my life. I saw depression as this thing that I had like completely shut down. And I think, that's why the first 2 years were very rough on me, because I thought I would see myself making way and like making, taking some steps forward, and then like taking like 10 in reverse every now and then when another mild depression, a depression would happen to me. So it was one of those things where I realized, all right, like if depression is a part of me, like let me nurture it. Like if my mind feels depressed, instead of like going in this like militant mentality of like, no, I can't feel this way, it was like asking my mind like, yo, like what is it that it needs? And most of the time it's because I was so busy, putting others people's things before me, and I realized, yo, I gotta show love to my own mind to really get through the days. So that's what Love Your Mind came from. It was one of those things where, like, take time to nurture yourself, take time to nurture your soul, take time for your mind to really water that plant. It's easy for us, and it's kind of sometimes normalized in society to really, like, offer, the other cheek or extend a hand. But, extend the hand to yourself as well. Like, that is just as important, if not more, because if we're not at an 100% mentally, then how are we gonna be able to help people to our fullest potential?
It just goes back to like that. Um, it's kind of like a metaphor when they talk about like in a plane that's going down. Like you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you
Yeah.
can save somebody else. You
Mm-hmm.
can't save yourself, right? Like there's no point.
Mm.
But you mentioned something about you giving and giving and giving to everybody else and not having enough to give to yourself. I once heard a quote. It was like you can't pour from an empty cup. And so,
Exactly.
did you feel like you didn't have that coming in towards you from other people, and so now you had to find a way to maybe give love to yourself in your own mind?
No, it wasn't much of receiving from them, but it was one of those things that, like, as a person, I am someone that tends to always be the helping hand, and I love that about myself, that I offer that. But it was just one of those things where, like, I would just focus on that so much more. So by the time that I got to me, or like my me time, it was just, empty cup, and I realized that that was just like not a good thing for me, and it wasn't working. So something had to change.
Yeah, I think it's a really good example of, because I think often people think when, oh, I'm so selfless because I always am doing something for someone else. And a lot of times I think that's like an avoidant behavior of not addressing how you feel about yourself.
Exactly.
And and that was something that I really resonate with, and I've said it on this show too, but like before, it's like you're trying to be a nice person, but you're not nice to yourself, and that's really, really hard to maintain.
Yeah.
Whereas if you focus on yourself, like that's not selfish. Like I mean, if you want to call it, you have to focus on yourself first, because once you get yourself right, you're naturally inclined to help others, and you can actually
Mm-hmm.
do it in a genuine way, not as a way
Exactly.
of kind of unhappy with something in my life, but I'm just going to try to help out others, and that's just, it's not sustainable. You can do it
Yeah.
here and
No.
there. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, and it just, it doesn't last. It feels, similar. What I brought up earlier is paper over crack. It's like a paper over crack solution. And it's just, how am I gonna show other people love if I'm not showing myself love? How do I know, you know, if I can't give it to myself, how do I expect to feed it to others? That's just kind of like always felt to me a little bit like dodgy.
Yep.
I got a question going back to the way you talked about depression. It used to be maybe a thought of like, oh, I'm going to take this, like I can't feel this, like I'm going to deny it, versus, oh hey, have you started to recognize depression? Is it like episodic where it's like, okay, I know this, I know the way it feels, or do you feel like it can come into like a disguised form, where it takes you a little
Yeah.
bit to recognize, oh wait, this is maybe a behavior because I'm feeling depressed, or this is depression in a way that I don't know it.
Yeah, at first he came like as a disguise, and a lot of it, came through. I would consider it the window of imposter syndrome. Like that was a very big window before, and it was one of those things that like things, cool things would happen in my life where I couldn't really enjoy them. Like as soon as something would happen, I would get in my car and like bawl my eyes out and like hate everything. And so that was the first like real disguise that I got to really recognize. And then the second one just became whenever I felt either overworked or sleep deprived. One of those.
Deprived. There you got it.
There it is. Yeah, I
Tomato,
mean,
tomato.
I know, dude. Hey, learning English was hard. But yeah, it would come through that, and I realized that the more restless I felt, the more like, uh, man, no, I forgot the word. Sensitive I became, and that just would have like an easier gateway for just completely just seeing myself in the worst light possible.
I read a concept recently, like willpower has an energy level to it. If you have willpower against, let's say, depression or against a craving, there's a sustainability measurement there. Yeah, if you're sleep deprived, if you're not feeling fully energetic or at full strength, you're more likely to cave in
Yeah,
to anything that maybe you would otherwise have the willpower to not cave into.
exactly.
Is that what you're alluding to? Do you have like first-hand
Yeah,
experience with that?
yeah. I think that's what it. I mean, it just completely makes sense. Like, look at an athlete. Like an athlete that plays professionally. If they're not rested, they can't be expected to, perform to their fullest potential. And in a way, you gotta see your mind like that. If your mind's not rested, like how do you expect your mind to really like perform to its fullest potential? Like at the end of the day, it's like I see my mind like a muscle. Like if you're not exercising it, if you're not really putting the time into it, like you can't expect the mind to give you the solutions. Like you gotta like work through
That's some
those
real
with
stuff.
it.
Dude,
That's some real
no,
stuff.
it's spot on. It's spot on because like I try to preach this, but like I go to therapy now, not because I quote unquote need to. I mean, of course, there's stuff that comes up that
Yeah.
I like talking about, but I do it as a tool. I do
Mm.
it as a way to work on my mental side, my mental
Yeah.
health. Like it's like again, it goes to this analogy I've had before, but it's like you physically hurt yourself, like you physically break your wrist. What do? You go to a doctor, you get diagnosed,
Yeah.
and like you go to someone. It's like when people have real or experiencing depression or other mental health like real struggles. It's like I'll figure it out on my own. I'll power through it. Like you can't
Mhm.
power through a broken wrist. You can't power through mental disease and mental like real struggles.
Yeah.
And there's this huge misconception that I think we're starting to work through now. That's like there's professionals for a reason. You've got
Yeah.
close friends for a reason. Like these are things that oftentimes you can't work through alone, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. It's like that's okay, and that's a sign of strength,
Yeah.
not weakness. Like I used to think that showing your feelings and feeling stuff was a sign of weakness. Like I think to me that's courage, that's strength, that's vulnerability, because it's harder to do that.
Yeah. I mean, dude, mental trenches are not easy, man. Like to me, they're like the most intense. Like and
Yeah.
going through that solo. Fuck, man. Like, at the beginning, before we got to therapy, as human beings, like, I can look back at that and be like, what, dude, I don't know how I survived that.
Yeah.
It's just like so many calls were just such close calls that I was just like, I mean, like, no wonder that at any given point I was bound to snap. And then, like,
Hmm.
on top of like what we internalize as human beings, then you add on top of that society. Oh, dude, it's just like, ticking time bomb at that point.
Well, so I want to get into that next with you is like your environment. That's
Yeah,
the one thing we haven't talked about, the variable, which is a very significant variable, being you are a product or a result of your environment. Your
yeah.
environment's changed. I didn't track like what age you moved from Bogota to Miami to California, but has your social circle, have you ever stabilized and kept a social circle together? How has your environment, for better or for worse, played a
Yeah.
role in your life?
Uh, so I moved to from Colombia. I was there till I was 9, so we're, so from 91 to 2000. Environment in Colombia, it is what it is. A lot of people know Colombia as just Pablo Escobar and that's it, and Narcos. But it's that type of country that if what I love about Colombia is that it finds the joys in life even when it's darkest. And I feel like that's something that like I when I moved here, it was the biggest culture shock. Colombia is like so family oriented, to an extreme, but it has this essence of family. It has this essence of like, yo, you know what? Like, even though like someone got mugged today, I'm grateful to be alive, right? So that environment kind of like showed me like, and installed in my DNA, like, there's joy in the darkness every now and then, like there can be no darkness with no light, just how there can be like no light with no darkness. So when I moved to the States, it was one of those things, growing up in Miami, like it's, when we're young, life is a movie, so I'm like rolling with some homies that I was probably not supposed to be rolling with, and getting into a bit of like hood rat shit, and that itself taught me one thing. It kind of like gave me like this street smarts essence of things, and like how like sometimes people are just dealt some bad cards that they have to figure out how to deal with them. But through that I was introduced to skateboarding, and then skateboarding brought me into like the hardcore punk scene in South Florida, and all this DIY, like kind of unity essence of things were taught to me, and like, friendships that, are meant to be, long term. And honestly, that's from that, just my surrounding to LA. It was, this creative pool where you can just like express yourself and really like use your voice.
Well, how much of Miami did you bring with you to California? Like both literally with, not literally, but figuratively, like with your friends, who you were, and who you really like grew up to be in Miami. Like how much of that did you carry with you, and how much of that did you feel like you had to shed or leave
Yeah.
behind as part of your growth process?
So I think part of my growth process, what I really had to leave behind in Florida, that I had became there, was just that type of person that prioritized others over myself. I think that was the big one that I had to like realize. Okay, like I felt like in a lot of acquaintances and friendships and all, like I was the one that was really pumping the energy into that. So I saw California as that essence. Okay, I'll always be there for any homie that I've crossed paths with. I've always been that type of person, just because responding to a text takes 5 seconds, and if people can't really like take those sacrifice 5 seconds from their social media to respond to someone's text, then I don't know what to tell you. But I'm that type of person that if you text me, like I'll probably text you back within like 5 minutes or something, unless my phone is on do not disturb. Um,
No, that's great. It's no, that's a really good point, because I was listening to something, a podcast the other day, and one of the guy on the show, he was like, I make it a point. I think he does it maybe once a week, where he just texts someone that he hasn't spoken to in a while, but that he
yeah,
actually cares about. Like, hey, just wanted to check in, let you know I'm thinking about you. Like, how are you doing? And
exactly.
I've started to do that, and the response, it's so easy to do,
It's so
and
easy.
it makes people feel like really appreciated, and they should, because like these are people. I'm not just reaching out to some random person. Like, I'm reaching out to the people that I actually do care about, and to feel cared about, and to feel thought about, and to feel really heard and seen, and that like there people are thinking about you, is like a really good feeling. Like, I don't know if you've ever had it done to you, or like you've ever had it done to you, but like I've had it done to me,
Yeah.
and it's an amazing feeling, and it takes you a minute to send like a not even to
Yeah,
send a
dude,
message.
it's so, and like it's to the point to me that I'll freaking copy and paste it, and I'll just like specifically send it to people that I'm thinking about. And it's one of those things that is just like, if you have it if you're in your mind, just do it. But at the same time, there's people that I have in my life that we don't talk to on a daily basis, but we understand that as soon as we see each other, it's like we never left. And that's the one
Yep.
thing that I'm learning, with life. The older we get, life, our minds are, overwhelmed. We got work. Some of us have families. Some of us have kids. So I think people too have to understand that like things sometimes change. Sometimes that change might not feel good at first, but if you really give it a chance and try to grow with it, it's gonna feel beautiful.
Mm-hmm. You gonna say something?
Yeah, it just like sending that text is maybe just a form of showing love, and it feels good. And perhaps it is good. You know, up to you if you want to judge it that way. But for some reason, it feels good to show love, right? And I think like
Yeah.
that's something that maybe people don't take enough time, or I don't take enough time to do. But anytime I've done that, I've sent that text before. It actually feels good, and I just wonder if maybe we ought to just take more time to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
despite maybe even not even giving a response. Like, I don't even really care. I mean, like, if you get ghosted, I mean, fine, maybe that person's busy. Like,
Yeah.
it's more about doing it because you want them to know this.
Yeah.
And you always hear people when they have a significant loss is like tell your loved ones that you love them. And
Mhm.
there's a reason that people say that because they can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And like I don't ever want to have any regrets of like I wish I told this person I cared about them or I wish this person knew this. And that's
Yeah.
just one way to do it. I have a
Exactly.
question. Like, have you been able to? Because this is something I struggled like mightily with. I think I'm getting better. I'm definitely getting better. But like, do you still care about? Did you care about what other people think? And do you still care now? Does it still kind of dictate your life at all? Like, in
Uh.
if if you've if you made improvements, like how have you been able to do that?
Yeah. At first, I did. At first, it's one of those things that I think as human beings we do tend to find like some sort of fulfillment with some form of affirmation or validation from others, right? But I think the more I ended up finding myself nurturing within, the more I realized, oh, like what truly matters to me is what I see myself as a person and what my actions do for others. Besides that, like there's really no benefit in really caring what others like have to say about it because they don't know what I'm going through. They don't know like the daily things that I go through and all that stuff. So it's become easier for me to detach myself of like feeling some sort of way when it comes to what people think about me. I just it's one of those things that I just want people to judge me based off the character and like the good deeds that I feel as a human being like are being portrayed. But I think that's what replaced that is that
Yeah.
aspect of it.
So what are your I guess I have like multiple ways I want to ask this. I can start with just like, are you happy? But I also just want to understand what are your thoughts of happiness in general? It's a topic that we've brought up multiple
Yeah.
times, and just from your perspective, like, what's just your first thoughts when I mention the word happiness?
I think it's like a beautiful you know, it's something beautiful in life. I think happiness is comes in waves, so I think they're enjoyable waves. You know, and I think the more I realize that there are waves, the more I've actually learned to be more grateful and thankful for them. You know, um, but you know, just with happiness, you know, there are sad moments. That's why I call them waves, and I'm learning that like there are sad moments that are very important too that we should be grateful for. Because without happiness, there's no sadness, and without sadness, there's no happiness.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know, like when I started my mental health journey, I always thought like at some point I was gonna reach this like level where I was like, all right, I'm gonna hit this and I'm gonna be happy now, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
always gonna be happy. And I got to a point where I had my quote unquote breakthrough, if you will, and there was a period of sustained like euphoria because it was like I just worked through the toughest, something I'd struggled with my whole life, and I got a bunch of support and outreach, and that felt good, but like that didn't last, and then like it was like
Mm-hmm.
all right, back down to earth. But I have much more of like inner peace.
Yeah.
So, and you can kind of move throughout life with a purpose, with a direction now, or I feel like I can. But I also like it's opened my eyes because I'm not happy all the time, and like I'm okay, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And as long as you know that like what you're doing on this earth like is for a reason, or you feel like you're doing something for a reason, I think that's all that really matters. Like, do you feel like you have a purpose in life now? Kind of like, if so, like, what is it? If not, like, we'd love to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts there as well.
I feel like the purpose in life is just try to like nurture and help others people's find their ways, navigating through life. I've always been a people person, I love conversations. I think like people grow so much from just talking to each other and like learning from each other's experiences, and I feel like that's my purpose to me. My purpose to me is to be that type of person, whether it's through my art, whether it's through clothing, whether it's through some freelance design job that I have with someone else. I just feel like those moments are key. you know just doing that, and tapping into a little bit what you just said. I think I agree so much on that. Like at first, like seeing happiness as the end goal, but I think at a point you just reach this thing where you're just like, it's more about peace, because
Yeah.
peace is found in all aspects of emotions. Peace is found in confusion. Peace is found in happiness, sadness, anger. Whatever it is, there's always that product that could be found there, and it's that inner peace.
When you're channeling your creativity or creating art, what what's the best mood for you to be in for your like best result or your best work?
Um, usually Usually, I tend to create the most deeper messaging is whenever I'm going through something dark, or yeah, or like some sort of tough moment has happened. I have realized that when I'm on that happy wave, I tend to be more disconnected, kind of from creativity, because I just kind of want to like cherish that moment. So I tend to just keep to myself in those instances. But I do think like once I'm like coming out of that happy wave and start realizing like, all right, like we're about to go back to real life, that's when I'm like, all right, like let's cook this thing, because I'm the type of creative that I love to, in a way you can call it like method design. Like whatever I'm going through, that's what I want to portray through whatever I'm making. Um,
So
so yeah.
where can, like, I know you said right before we hopped on, like, you try to get rid of that sense of ego, but like, for our listeners, where can they find you? What kind of work have you done recently? Like, what are you most proud of? Like, use this just as a chance to kind of talk and promote like your brand and yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. The handle is Bad Boy Poppy, which is a funny
Yeah.
story. It's not as deep as people think.
We got time.
uh, and then the brand that me and my really good, like one of my best friends growing up, his name is Matthew Barrios. Shout out Matthew. We started a brand called Mauvais Garcon, and like funny enough, it's all mental health advocate based, graphic wise, and we're doing a lot of sustainability and upcycling, from like grabbing scraps to old t-shirts, like shedding new life. And the reason why we felt like that connected so much with the brand is because when you really think about it, you look at damages and like vintage and things that are like stored away, and you kind of like never give them a second chance. But like as human beings, life is about second chances. It's about going at it again. So whenever we're working on it, we're like, oh shit, dude, like mental health and upcycling go hand in hand in so many other ways than you would think. Because if you upcycle a specific vintage garment, that's a one of one. Just how like just like how everyone out there in the world is a one of one. So that piece will probably resonate to a specific human being. Like that was meant for that person. So there was this like magic behind it. So yeah, I mean you can find us on Instagram. And yeah, projects that I'm working
Anything
on
you're
right
like
now.
most proud of?
Dude, the stance collab was crazy. I think
Yeah,
that's
you got,
the one
yeah.
that was, yeah, because it was like a global release, and I was just like very like honored that they thought of me for that one. But I think besides that was getting to work with like Childish Gambino back in 2019. That was like probably like a cool proud moment at the time.
That's I actually checked out the clothing. You might have a new buyer here.
Oh
The
yeah.
other clothing line you've got after the show at some point. But I didn't know the backstory behind the upcycling, which is super cool. All right, we
Yeah.
got three rapid fire questions for you to wrap this thing up. Christian, first of all, thank you for coming on. thank you for being so open and vulnerable and sharing your story. I'm sure there's people out there, listeners out there, that are going to resonate with something you said that is going to help them or propel them or just make them feel heard and understood. So
Yeah,
thank you for doing this.
of course.
Three rapid fire questions. Number one, what is either like best piece of advice you've ever been given, or just like a favorite quote, something that's really resonated with you?
Best piece of advice I can give to people is sometimes when people are opening up to you, it's better to just listen and just let them talk. That is big advice I give to everyone, and that was one advice I gave to my parents.
That's super wise. That it gets think of like, what do therapists do? They listen. Right? That's their job, is
Exactly.
to just listen. They're not responding with relating to themselves. They're not trying to tell you it's okay. They're just listening.
And there's something about human beings that when they hear themselves talk, they tend to kind of like get the just like, oh, like that's what's going on.
Right. Okay. Second question: if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be?
Does it have to be fictional or non-fictional?
Anything you want.
Tony
Never.
Soprano.
Tony? You said Tony
Tony
Soprano?
Soprano, yeah.
Hell yeah, make it a reservation for 3.
Yeah, dude, I love The Sopranos.
That's awesome.
All right. Lastly, just like hobbies, like what do you like to do in your free time?
Dude, skateboarding. I'm not good. I'm not pro level, but there's something so fun about just skateboarding. And I've been, dabbling here and there on like some climbing gyms. So
Nice.
every now and then
All
I
right,
dab.
man. Well, thank you, Christian, again for doing this. We really appreciate it. We're gonna sign off here, guys. Love you all.
Let